There are days when you look in the mirror and no longer recognize yourself. The dreams that once burned so brightly now flicker and fade. Your faith feels fragile, and fear whispers in your ear. All your efforts are meaningless. But sometimes it's in the very moment you feel the smallest that a door quietly opens, a door that leads deep into the soul. This is the story of a girl named Elia, who found the courage to step into the darkness, not to fight it, but to listen. And in doing so, she discovered something many never realize in their entire lives. Fear doesn't need to be destroyed. It only needs to be understood. Come, step into Elia's cave, the place where she finally met herself again. Elia was once a girl full of light, but that light didn't always stay. Life, with its unexpected blows, slowly caused her to retreat inward. Every failure, every rejection, closed her heart a little more. Little by little, Elia grew quiet. She stopped dreaming big, and she no longer dared to step beyond the tiny safe zone she had drawn for herself. One day, in the midst of mental chaos, she sought out an old teacher, a wise man who lived in solitude on a mountain. He looked into her eyes, saw the sorrow she tried to hide, and said something strange. If you want to break the chains around your heart, you must enter the deep cave behind the hill, the home of a voice that everyone fears, but few ever truly listen to. Elia was confused. A cave? A voice? It sounded like something from a fairy tale, but like anyone desperate enough to cling to even the faintest thread of hope, she nodded. Something deep inside her stirred, a quiet knowing that if she didn't take this step now, she might never find her way back to herself again. And so, the journey began. The hill where the cave lay was shrouded in thick mist. The ground was damp, and fallen leaves gave way beneath her feet like whispers from the past. Elia stood at the cave's mouth, hesitation rising in her chest. There were no signs, no welcoming lanterns, no one waiting inside. Only her and the pounding of her own heartbeat. She didn't know what waited beyond that curtain of darkness, but she stepped forward anyway. One step, then another. The darkness wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. There was no light, no sound. Every breath she took echoed twice as loud in the suffocating silence. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold, rough wall of the cave, just to make sure she was still real. And then it began. A whisper, thin as fog, raspy like the breath of an ancient soul, rose from the depths of the cave. You think you're strong enough to face me? Elia froze. No one was in sight, but the voice was terrifyingly clear, as if it came from inside her own mind. You remember the failures, don't you? The rejections, the heartbreak, the moments you were forgotten. I am that voice. I am your fear. The voice didn't shout. It whispered, but each word cut like a blade, digging into old memories, memories that had never truly healed. Visions flashed before her eyes. Elia, trembling alone in a dark room. Elia, placing her trust in someone who walked away. Each scene hit her like it had just happened yesterday. She wanted to cover her ears. She wanted to run, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice rose. Don't run this time. Stay. So Elia took a deep breath and sat down in the heart of the darkness. She didn't know what would come next, but for the first time, instead of fleeing from the voice, she listened. She didn't let her mind spiral. She didn't let her heart hide. She simply stayed and listened in the blackness of the cave, in a space that felt untouched by life. Elia finally reached for something she had spent years avoiding. The truth that fear didn't live out there. It lived within her. In the thick darkness of the cave, Elia sat still, as if she had become one with the cold, unfeeling stone. The voice echoed once more. It didn't scream. It wasn't angry, but it stirred something deep inside her, shaking her foundation. Why have you come here, Elia? She closed her eyes, took a long breath, and quietly replied, because I'm tired of letting you control every decision in my life. The air fell silent. Even the voice paused, as if taken aback by her honesty. I don't control you. The voice finally responded, softer now, almost sorrowful. "I'll only whisper. It was you who chose to believe me." Elia opened her eyes. That answer was terrifying in its simplicity. "But you always said I would fail, that no one needed me, that I was too weak to make a difference." "I said those things, yes, but I never forced you to believe them. You listened and you stopped. You listened and turned down chances. You listened and gave up before you even tried." The words felt like an accusation, but strangely, Elia didn't feel angry. Instead, she felt lighter. All these years, she had painted fear as the enemy, a monster to slay. But now, sitting with it, hearing it speak, not as a tyrant, but as a quiet voice, she saw the truth. Fear was never cruel. It simply existed. It simply spoke. And the only reason it ever held power was because she had agreed to let it. "So what happens if I stop listening to you?" Elia asked, calm now. "I will still speak," the voice said, "but I won't be able to stop you. I exist to warn you. But if you choose to move forward, even while hearing me, then I have no power at all." Elia smiled, a small smile, but one filled with strength. At last, she understood. Fear was not her enemy. It was a harsh friend, one that always reminded her of what could go wrong, but could never make her stop unless she let it. And for the first time, Elia didn't try to destroy fear. She simply had a conversation with it. As a part of herself, Elia still sat there, deep within the thick darkness of the cave. But something strange was happening. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not because the fear had disappeared, but because she had stopped running from it. She suddenly realized, her whole life, she had been trying to be strong in the wrong way. She thought courage meant suppressing every fragile emotion, hiding every trembling feeling. But now, in this cold, still place, she had learned something completely different. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the choice to keep moving, even when your hands are shaking. In the silence, she began to see the dreams she had buried long ago. Dreams of writing, of speaking, of simply living as her true self. They weren't dead. They had only been waiting for her to be brave enough to come back. And something inside her began to shift. The voice of fear still spoke, but no longer sounded like a command. Now it was just a distant whisper, like wind passing through cracks in stone. Elia stood up. Her legs still trembled slightly, but her heart no longer wanted to turn back. She faced a way out. Everything was still dark, but somewhere far off, a faint light began to flicker, not from the outside, but from within her. And in that moment, she understood. Life never truly takes the light away. It only asks if we're willing to reignite it ourselves. And Elia, she had done just that. Not by shouting, not with a grand victory, but through quiet stillness, honest confrontation, and a fragile little belief that she deserved to move forward. Fear stepped back, not because it lost, but because its role was complete. It had been the gatekeeper of her soul, waiting to show the way to those willing to walk through it. Elia walked on, not out of the cave, but out an old version of herself. Each step echoed, gentle yet steady. She was no longer the girl who hesitated at the entrance. She had touched the darkness, and realized it too was only light that hadn't been understood yet. The first light touched Elia's face as she stepped out of the cave. It wasn't blinding. It wasn't radiant. It was gentle, like the hand of a mother returning home after a long absence. She squinted against the soft glow. Her shoulders trembled, not from cold, but from something unfamiliar. Relief. She was no longer the girl who had entered the cave yesterday. The sky above was still gray, clouds drifting slowly across the horizon, and the world beyond still held its challenges. But something inside Elia had shifted. She no longer feared the future. She no longer felt chained by the whispers in her head. She understood now. Fear would still be there, like a faithful shadow, honest and ever-present. But she was no longer its puppet. Elia stepped onto the narrow path, slowly but steadily. Each step felt like it touched a new part of herself, parts she hadn't seen in years. She carried no weapons, only one thing, awareness. And in that awareness, Elia knew she had truly begun to live, not a life built on avoiding pain, but one built on walking through it, with her heart still open and her eyes fixed forward. And that's how Elia found her true strength. Not by eliminating fear, but by walking with it, with a heart that no longer needed to run. Within each of us, there's a cave. There are whispers that make us want to give up. But if we are brave enough to turn back, to listen, and to keep moving forward, then the darkest place can become the very source of our light. Remember this: fear is not the end. It is only the doorway, leading us back to who we truly are.